I just got done from seeing a screening of Transformers 1. This is the new animated Transformers film. This one is the first animated Transformers theatrical movie since all the way back in 1986 with the classic Transformers 86. This movie was written by Eric Pearson, directed by Josh Cooley, and features a number of new actors playing the roles of familiar characters. But because this is more of like a year one story, it's called Transformers 1 because it's the beginning of a trilogy and also the earliest point in the timeline, meaning that this takes place in the early days of well, maybe not the early days, but deep into the past on Cybertron. And basically it basically gives us the origin story of the Autobots and the Decepticons and how everything came to play. It's sort of this almost like a Shakespearean tragedy, because the movie follows Orion Pax, played by Chris Hemsworth, and his buddy D16, played by Brian Tyree Henry. And now I'm going to get to my thoughts on the acting in just a minute, but they're basically really good friends, and they do nice things for each other. At one point in the film, Orion does a really nice thing for D. It's just, and they go on this adventure to uncover the truth about Cybertron, because Cybertron has been a certain type of way for a long time, and they have been mining for many, many years, and things aren't always as they seem. There's more than meets the eye in Cybertron. And they go on a quest to discover the truth, and when they find the truth out, it's actually kind of a big surprise because it changes everything. And we find out that these two characters have been living a lie for most of their life, if not all of their life, actually all of their life. And because of this shocker, both of them go in this sort of, they go in different directions, because it shows how two different people can cope with the same travesty, one in a healthy way, one in a not so healthy way. They're joined by Scarlett Johansson, who plays Ariel, the early version of Alita 1, and you can instantly tell that it's her. She has a very recognizable voice. And then B127 is Keegan-Michael Key, Bumblebee before he was Bumblebee. And Steve Buscemi is Starscream, and he was pretty awesome in that. Now, I understand, first of all, that Peter Cullen and Frank Welker, those are the voices of Optimus and Megatron. They always will be. I am not in any way going to fight that, because they have been the voices going back to the very beginning. And therefore, as a result of that, there's probably a lot of controversy going into this, because I'm sure a lot of people were thinking, wait a minute, like, how could they change Optimus and Megatron? Well, the film, this is an earlier point in the timeline. So because it's an earlier point in the timeline, Chris Hemsworth still has a deep enough voice to properly portray Optimus, or Orion Pax in this case. And even though Brian Tyree Henry doesn't really sound at all like Frank Welker, he does a good job on his own as D16. Now, there was one point in the film, without going into spoilers, no spoilers here, there was one point in the movie where they could have actually changed voices. There's one point where both these characters have like a change near the end, and it would have been a perfect time to bring in Frank Welker and Peter Cullen. They chose not to do that. That tells me that the next two films of the trilogy, I don't know if they're going to be called Transformers 2 and Transformers 3, but the next two films of the trilogy could pick up on that. Now, in addition to that, Lawrence Fishburne is here, and we get to hear him talk about the Matrix again, so that was cool, except it's a different Matrix. And John Hamm is also in this film as Sentinel Prime. Sentinel Prime is a great character, because Sentinel Prime is almost like the Sentinel Prime is like Homelander. Very, very similar to Homelander. Now, as far as the visual effects go, the film looked very pretty. The music was done by Brian Tyler. And it was a very, like, the film kind of gave me a vibe of like the Star Wars Clone Wars style, where it was sort of that, that digital type of style, but not quite like Beast Wars, and obviously a lot more polished. Some of the fight scenes we see near the end of the film really picks up in the second half. The first 20 or so minutes are done sort of building up the relationship between Orion Pax and D16, and how they would eventually become Optimus and Megatron, and how the battle for Cybertron would begin. And there's a lot more, because there is an unresolved plot thread with an alien menace that they talk about that I'm sure they're going to visit in future movies. Now, the question I'm sure people have is, where does it tie in? Well, it's complicated because in some ways it could tie into the Michael Bay films because Michael Bay is a producer. I mean, since he did the Transformers films, he's always going to be listed as a producer, even if he doesn't really do that much, even if he's not super involved the way that he would be as a director. However, because it's so far back in the timeline, there are a number of different Transformers continuities that it could begin. And the thing is, there's been some confusion because there's so many different canons, there's so many different, animated series and cartoons and comic books, and I am nowhere near an expert on Transformers. I am not. To be honest with you, I have had on my list of things to do for years now, go back and watch the original series. I watch the movie from time to time, but I need to go back and actually watch from start to finish the first 3 seasons of Generation 1. I really need to because it's been a long time and my memories of watching G1 as a kid are very, very vague because it was almost on when I was too little, maybe I was too young to really catch it. I kind of came into cartoons with the 87 Turtle series, so before that, and I didn't even get into it in 87, I probably got into it in 88. But before that, the G.I. Joes, the Transformers, that was all on reruns. That was all reruns. I didn't get to see it when it first aired. So I did want to go back. So I'm not an expert on it, but it takes place so far back in the timeline that it actually would be a pretty neat little way to introduce a new fan to Transformers. They don't really talk too much about modern stuff. They don't really go into a lot of modern stuff. They don't, meaning like stuff in the future. Like they don't tease anything with Beast Wars or anything with Galvatron or any of that stuff. None of that stuff from the future is teased whatsoever. It's just a self-contained story. This could be a self-contained story and not tie into anything if they really wanted it to be because, like I said, there's one plot thread that's unresolved, but everything else comes to a resolution, and it could end right here. Plus, people who are Transformers maniacs kind of know where it's going anyways. Let's hope they stick to it. But at the same time, the creators of this movie stated that they were given creative freedom to do whatever they wanted. So when you do that, sort of like what happened with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, you may open yourself up to problems because not every person who you put in charge of doing these things is going to keep everything in canon. Not every person that you think about doing this with is going to really respect the source material. Now, I felt like this did. There were Easter eggs here and there to music from future films and things like that. But as far as I know, this didn't harm any of the canon, and it is a fun movie. I had a good time watching it. I saw it with an audience of children and adults, and everybody was laughing. There were a few really good scenes. I liked it a lot. I really did enjoy it. So if you're a Transformers fan, you're probably going to go see it anyways. If you're not and you like the Transformers and you like animated theatrical films, go check it out. Go check it out. You're going to have a good time. It's about 104 minutes. No big deal. Anyways, with that being said, I'm taking off. Have a good one. Take care. I'll catch you in the next one.